In the heart of Switzerland, nestled beside the serene waters of Lake Geneva, lies one of the most beautiful and tranquil places on earth. The calm surface of the lake, reflecting the towering Alps and the picturesque towns along its shores, gives an impression of peace. But beneath this veneer of beauty, there's an old enduring mystery that has haunted the people of the region for decades. It's the story of the Lady of the Lake, a mysterious apparition who has been seen by locals and tourists alike for nearly a century, and whose presence is tied to an unsolved tragedy from the 1930s. The story begins in 1934, during a summer like many others, when the waters of Lake Geneva sparkled under the warm sun, and vacationers from all over Europe gathered to enjoy the natural beauty of the region. In a small town along the shore, a young woman arrived to spend some time in the peaceful surroundings. Her name was never officially recorded, but it is said that she was beautiful, with dark hair that contrasted sharply against her pale skin, and she always dressed in white. The locals quickly took notice of her, because she was often seen walking alone by the lake, gazing out at the water as though in deep thought or perhaps sorrow. She became a familiar figure to the people who frequented the lake's shore. It wasn't uncommon to see her in the early morning hours, before the sun had fully risen, or late in the evening as the light faded into twilight. There was something about her that seemed to hold a sadness, as if she was waiting for something or someone. Despite her constant presence, the young woman rarely spoke to anyone, and nobody seemed to know much about her, where she came from, who she was, or why she had come to Lake Geneva. One fateful evening, as a storm approached the lake, the winds picked up, and the once calm waters began to stir. A few local fishermen reported seeing the young woman walking along the shore, as she had done many times before, but this time she seemed different. They said she walked more slowly, her head lowered, a white dress billowing in the rising wind. When they returned to shore later that night, the storm had fully descended upon the lake, and the woman was nowhere to be seen. The next morning after the storm had passed, her absence was noted by the people who had grown accustomed to her daily walks. The local authorities were alerted, and a search was launched, but no trace of her could be found. The only clue was a small handbag, discovered near the edge of the water, containing a few personal items, but nothing that could reveal her identity. Days turned into weeks, and then months, but the woman in white had simply vanished without a trace. The waters of Lake Geneva, deep and dark, seemed to have swallowed her whole. What happened next, however, is what truly transformed this tragic disappearance into a lasting mystery, a mystery that continues to baffle and haunt people to this day. Not long after the search for the young woman was called off, reports began to emerge from those who lived by the lake and from travelers passing through. They spoke of sightings, strange ghostly sightings, of a woman dressed in white, walking along the very same paths where the young woman had once been seen. These reports all carried a common thread. The woman in white seemed to appear only during certain times, usually in the early hours of the morning or late in the evening, just before darkness fell over the lake. The accounts described a figure who appeared almost out of nowhere, her pale dress glowing softly against the backdrop of the lake, her dark hair flowing in the wind. She would walk slowly along the shore, her eyes fixed on the water, seemingly unaware of anyone around her. Some witnesses claimed they tried to approach her, calling out to offer help or inquire if she was lost, but the woman never responded. Instead, she would simply vanish into thin air, disappearing as mysteriously as she had appeared. The sightings continued year after year, sometimes sporadic and sometimes more frequent. But they always followed the same pattern: a woman in white, forever walking the shores of Lake Geneva, always alone, and always disappearing before anyone could reach her. The locals began to refer to her as the Lady of the Lake, a name that carried a deep sense of melancholy, as though she was a soul trapped in some kind of eternal limbo, forever bound to the lake where she had vanished. For decades her story has persisted, passed down from generation to generation. Even today, visitors to Lake Geneva occasionally report seeing her, though the sightings are rare and fleeting. The Lady of the Lake has become an integral part of the folklore surrounding the region. A ghost story that refuses to fade away, much like the woman herself. Over the years, there have been many theories as to who the Lady of the Lake was and what might have caused her disappearance. Some believe she may have been the victim of a tragic accident, perhaps swept away by the stormy waters on that fateful night. Others suggest that her death was not an accident at all, but rather the result of foul play, perhaps a murder that was carefully concealed beneath the waves of the lake. Still, others think her disappearance may have been a suicide, a final sorrowful act of a woman who had lost all hope. Yet despite the many theories, there are no answers. The identity of the woman remains a mystery, as does the reason for her haunting presence by the lake. Paranormal investigators who have studied the case are divided in their opinions. Some believe the sightings of the Lady of the Lake are nothing more than a combination of overactive imaginations and optical illusions, particularly in the early morning mist or the fading light of dusk. Others, however, are convinced that the woman is a genuine spirit, a restless soul who has yet to find peace. There are stories from those who claim to have felt a strange, almost unearthly chill in the air when they saw her. Some say they heard faint whispers or felt a sudden inexplicable sorrow wash over them as they stood by the lake, watching the figure in white walk silently by. One account in particular stands out, a story told by an elderly man who as a young boy lived near the lake and witnessed the Lady of the Lake on multiple occasions. He recalled a moment when during one of her appearances, she stopped briefly and turned her head as though she was looking right at him. He described the feeling as both terrifying and deeply sad, as though the woman was pleading for help, but unable to ask for it. As the years have passed, the story of the Lady of the Lake has taken on an almost mythic quality, a reminder that even in the most beautiful places, darkness can linger just beneath the surface. Lake Geneva, with its breathtaking scenery and peaceful waters, holds a secret that may never be fully understood. The Lady of the Lake continues to be a symbol of this mystery, a ghostly figure forever walking the shores, perhaps searching for something lost, or perhaps simply reliving the final moments of her life over and over again. For those who visit Lake Geneva today, the legend of the Lady of the Lake adds a sense of eerie wonder to the experience. Some come to see the beauty of the Alps reflected in the clear blue water, while others with a more curious mind come hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious figure who has haunted the lake for so long. Many leave without seeing anything out of the ordinary, but some, those who are more attuned to the strange and unexplained, may feel a presence, a subtle shift in the air, as though they are not quite alone. Perhaps on a quiet evening, if the light is just right, they might catch sight of her, a woman in white, walking silently along the edge of the water, her story untold, her fate unknown. The Lady of the Lake remains one of Switzerland's greatest unsolved paranormal mysteries, a story that refuses to fade away, much like the ghostly figure who still walks the shores of Lake Geneva, a lonely spectre forever bound to the waters that claimed her.